Right, be prepared for plenty more over the coming months on our top story in our news review.
Yes.
The Independent is leading on the British Prime Minister David Cameron's bid to renegotiate the terms of Britain's EU membership. He's written a letter to Donald Tusk.
Now onto the Wall Street Journal. It has the story of how Portugal's government has fallen after just days of being in power.
The International New York Times reports on the death of Helmut Schmidt. The former German Chancellor has died at the age of 96.
The Financial Times leads on what's being called the largest cyber attack on financial firms in US history. The paper reports that personal information of around 100 million people were accessed by cyber thieves.
The Times warns that laughter, or too much of it, could be an early sign of dementia.
And it's trending all over social media. I've talked about it already. It's the pink. That's what it's called. It's 16-carat pink diamond, setting a world auction record. It fetched more than $28 million. It would match your outfit today, Adnan.
Yeah,
you can wear that.
You get diamonds like that in children's magazines, you know. They give you freebies.
I know.
Yeah, they look like that. Cornelia Meyer is here, CEO of MRL Corporation. Hello, Cornelia.
Good morning.
OK, well, you know, this EU debate is going to go on for a long time. We still don't know the exact date of Britain's referendum, when the people will have their say. But David Cameron no doubt has a difficult, very, very difficult situation personally for him, because he's got to appease both sides in his own party, and they're very opposing views.
Yeah, you know, he's playing in my... I have to come up and fess up. I strongly believe that Britain should stay in the EU, and he's playing a very dangerous game. I mean, I think he personally would like to stay, but he was under pressure from his backbenchers who want to leave, and democracy being what it is, he had to give in. But he came out and said, well, here are a few red lines during the election earlier this year, and one of the red lines was these benefits for people from the EU who come to Britain, and he has now said, okay, it's no longer a red line. And that's not good for within his party, but what does it do for his stance with the EU? Because when you have an opposite party as somebody who negotiates for a living, when you have the opposite party who is coming and going, doesn't know where they really stand, it makes negotiations not easier.
Well, it's a difficult one. I mean, as you've explained, it's a really difficult tightrope for him to walk, personally, on many levels. But at the same time, the British people have to kind of wade through all the politics and figure out what is the best thing for me, for this country. And I think that's the difficulty with this. Will the person who's got a tick in a box in some point in 2017 really know the arguments for and against clearly? Because at the moment the messages are so mired in politics, and
it will be so polemic. But before then, I'm thinking of now, before then, we are negotiating with the European Union. And so we need to have a clear stance, because the EU is also in a tricky slot. You know, they have Britain wanting to renegotiate. They had agreements with Switzerland, which is outside of the EU, but they said we are against the free movement of people. So their things are becoming unstuck. They're becoming unstuck on so many fronts that it's hard for them too.
And this next story about Portugal, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the issues that David Cameron said, the four key objectives or aims in terms of EU reform, is that national parliaments have more power, and they are less lent on from, you know, from the centre of Europe. And I mean, in Portugal, they are seeing the consequences, aren't they, of being a part of the Eurozone, and where a government's being told what to do by others.
Yeah, but I think that's it's a bit unfair to compare.
I know it is unfair.
We are not.
But do you see what I mean?
But we are not in the euro, and it was probably a good decision for us not to go in the euro. Portugal is in the euro, and a lot of the southern rim, you know, of Europe have vastly benefited for being in the euro. But then they were over-levered. The financial crisis came. They were in harsh times, and so they had the really harsh austerity measures. But you know, we had harsh austerity measures without having the EU telling us. We had George Osborne telling us we had to have harsh austerity measures. They had very harsh austerity measures. The economy is back on the growth path, but between 2011 and 2013 it was really quite grim. But what happened is like what happened in Greece. The measures were so harsh that some of these splinter parties, this left-wing and right-wing splinter parties, became, who said no more austerity, became very strong. And so we have now Syriza-like people in Portugal, you know, saying, well, we don't want that austerity. So, in other words, you know, Greece. Point 2 or 2 is now starting all over again.
Yes, absolutely. It really, you know, it looks as if the left may have been in Portugal, inspired by Syriza in Greece. Very good point. Okay, in the Financial Times, which one is this? This is the American edition, about this hacking scam. Apart from the fact that it's clearly a crime, is it really going to affect anybody apart from the banks involved?
Well,
I mean, you know, just generally, is it going to affect the system?
I have two things to say. First of all, these were really, really brilliant criminals. I mean, they got data, they manipulated shares, and they sort of had illegal drug payments laundered through the scheme. So they really worked on all fronts. That's the first thing. The second thing is our personal data are also not safe. You know, we are taking the safety for granted. It's a huge problem for corporations who have to deal, especially banks and asset managers who have to deal with the personal information of their clients. But it's also on a personal level for us an issue, because our Blackberries can get hacked into, our computers can get hacked into. I just wonder, though, if we are taking it for granted, because I think this sort of story is in the news so much at the moment, especially, for example, in the last few weeks with TalkTalk, the UK telecoms provider being hacked. It's something we discuss regularly. I would imagine the general public are very aware that their data is at risk. What is done? What can we do against it? And it's a little bit like when you are the army versus being a terrorist, or when you're the police versus being the terrorist. As the police, you have to be right 100% of the time. As a terrorist, you're successful if you're right 0.0001% of the time. And that's the same thing with keeping our data safe. It's really a very, very big task.
Cornelia, it's great that you're here, particularly this morning, because we've given you Frankfurter Allgemeine, and we don't speak German. So what is Wolfgang Gauck? Is it Wolfgang Gauck, the German president? What has he said about Helmut Schmidt?
Joachim Gauck.
Yeah, Joachim Gauck.
Joachim Gauck. But I have to first say I'm an Anglo-Swiss. I'm British and Swiss. I'm not
But you
German.
speak German, right? No, do you speak German?
I do. Of course I speak German. but I have to, you know, I have to sort of lay down the line here. So he said, and he rightly said, and Helmut Schmidt is one of my all-time heroes, rightly said, he's the most significant statesman in German post-war history. And he's right. Angela Merkel will go up to that limb. Look, he was a great crisis manager when there were the floods in Hamburg. He averted a lot of he was really a good manager of that. He was a great European. He helped European integration.
But he became Chancellor in 1974, so we're talking the height of the Cold War.
Exactly. No, I'm coming to that. He was a great NATO ally.
Don't
he was a great NATO ally. We owe him some time. And very significantly, whilst he was being a great NATO ally, and that was hard for him with his rather left-wing Social Democrats, he also continued the détente with Eastern Germany that his predecessor Willy Brandt started. And without those talks, without that rapprochement, we would never have seen the wall fall. So he is of great historic significance. He was a great statesman, really a towering figure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now let's talk about the Times front page. Don't laugh, you might be suffering dementia. This is new research that highlights that an early warning for those who could be on that path is that their humour changes, what their sense of humour changes, what they find funny changes.
I'm not surprised. I had a sort of close relative who was going down that path, who's now passed away. And her character changed. She was a sweet lady, and suddenly she became very tough, quite unmanageable. And everybody said, what's going on? But it was the onset of Alzheimer's. So I'm not surprised to say that, you know, a different sense of humor could be part of that.
Cornelia, thank you very much indeed. That's a very pertinent story because,
Yeah,
you know, so many of us
as we
know
live longer.
someone. Exactly.
As we live longer,
Yeah.
it's a very sad story, and it's good to see the early signs. And I know
really-
you want to talk about the pink.
We
Too
haven't
late.
time.
Too late. Yeah,
We'll see you
leave it for
soon.
another day.
Thanks,
you.
Cornelia.
Thanks a lot, Cornelia.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.